Okay, so as on it here, we're just going to open the file and have a play with it in Photoshop and see what we can create. So I'm going to go to File. Now, important, we've got different profiles on here, so you can use these different profiles if you think they help. We've got Adobe Landscape and whatever, and I'll probably just boost it a bit. So you can use the profiles that Adobe supplies and see if that helps at all. Another one is the Vivid. Is that effect? I think probably the landscape one for this one is quite nice, so we'll use that. And what I'm going to do is to take down the highlights so that we're not clipping. So I'm looking at the clipping area here. The dark areas I'm not too worried about because I want that bit of shadow. But what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to add a little bit more, just a touch of yellow temperature. I've dragged it up slightly, just looking at the image. And then a little trick that I've done was I take down the texture, or take up the texture rather, so I drag that all the way up to the right. And then I use the clarity and I'll bring that down. And what this does, it keeps the detail in the image. But when you've got these like woodland shots especially, it just spreads the colour a little bit and gives you a softer type look. Very nice, very picture-like image, so you know, it gives a nice effect. So, and you can do that as much as you want just to get the effect that you want. So I'm going to bring it down quite low and take the highlights down a little bit more because now we're clipping again. I want to bring the whites up just a little bit. I'm not bothered if I'm clipping a little bit in the sky because that's going to happen. And what I'm going to do with this is to emulate this light coming across in Photoshop. Can you see this band of light? Because that looks really nice and it could just do with a little bit more. We've got one coming over the back there and one here, and I'm going to introduce another band into this area. So to do that, we've now got the settings that we want. Still clipping a little bit. I'll bring the whites down just a little bit. There we go. So the histogram now is looking good. I'll open the image, double click the hand tool, that makes it fit to the screen. Go to the layers and duplicate the layer. Right click on the layer, duplicate layer. Click on OK. That just protects our image. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select the polygonal lasso tool. So you've got three lasso tools: the standard, the polygonal and the magnetic. So we're going for the polygonal in this case. And the big thing with this is usually that is set to 0 feather. So on the options bar you will see the feather option. And it's really important to think about your image in this case. And you have to play a little bit with this to get the setting exactly right how you require it. Now this is quite a large image. It's from a Canon EOS R camera, and that supplies a 30 megapixel image, so this is a big image. Now because of that, I'm going to put a feather on this, and the feather will be larger than if I used another image like out of a, say, a crop sensor camera. In that case we could probably use a feather of around 50 on this, and I'm going to use a feather of 70. So it is trial and error, but from around 50 to 70 is what I would go with. So I'm going to type in 70, make sure there's a space in between the PX, and I'm going to create a band of light. So I'm going to come from here, and I'm following the line of this one. You see the sun will be at a slightly different angle. I'm just going to come down to there and I'm going to double click there. I can move this. I'll make sure I click on this first option, which is new selection. I can go inside the selection, I can move it slightly. There we are. and you can see it's got a soft edge. We've got the curved edges there, which shows that we've got a feather on that. And I'm going to go now to the adjustments, and we click on the curves. Now I only use this usually in one way. Some people drag down the bottom and do what called S curves. They'll bring the shadows down and bring things up like this. I never do that. I use individual ones for each part of the image I want to adjust. And I usually just go to the middle and I make it darker or I make it brighter. Now in this case I'm going to make it brighter. So I've made it brighter by going to the middle and dragging up towards the top left hand corner. If I want it darker, I do the opposite. I'll get the brightness that I want. Sometimes I may even take it a little bit more than I need, because I can adjust it later by changing the opacity of the layer, just to make sure I've got everything that I need there. So once I've done that, if we look at the light now, it doesn't look the same as this light at the back, simply because we've adjusted the R, G and the B channels, so the red, the green and the blues, and we need to do that. We need to brighten up the entire range of colour to make it brighter. But now once I've done that, what I want to do is to introduce a little bit of yellow, because if we look at these going along here, they've got that touch of yellow to them, and that's why this one looks so natural. It doesn't match up to the bands of light going behind it. So how do we get yellow? Well, the opposite of blue, we've only got red, green and blue to play with, and we have to think of the opposite. So the opposite of blue is yellow. So if I click on the blue channel, so we select the preset from there, and on the blues, if I drag it up, it introduces more blue, and if I take it down, it will introduce more yellow. And now you can see I'm getting that magical colour that's in the background there. So just by dragging it down a little bit, I've matched the colours up. So that is how we introduce another band of light into the image. And I could also just emphasise a bit more shadow in between those two bands. So if I select the tool again, and I'm just going to come in this area, like that, and we'll do exactly the same again. We click on the adjustments, we click on the curves, and this time instead of going up, I'm going to drag it down just a little bit. And then I can click on the move tool and I can move this band of shadow around to where I want it, and that's just adding a little bit more depth in between those two. Now I may put another one just here, a band of light, not a shadow. So I'm going to come across here just to show you. Okay, you've got to think about where the light's coming from. Obviously the sun is in one pointed direction, so we're trying to look at those lines and match those up to where the position of the sun would be. And then I go to the curves, drag it up to add more light, and then I go to the blues and I drag it down to give it that bit of yellow. And now we've got an image that looks very natural, but looks much better by introducing that light into the front of the image. Okay, so once we've got that and we're happy with it, you can adjust the intensity of that by changing the opacity if you wanted to. I'll bring it down just a little bit, maybe just a touch. And then when I'm happy with all the adjustments, I can right click, flatten the image, and then we can save it as a JPEG or whatever we want to output it as. So there we go, that completes that little session, and I hope you enjoyed that. All the best from Les Arnold.